Fawn. So thank you everybody for joining us today. I really appreciate it. I'm just going to ask you to turn off your cameras, put your voice on mute so that we don't have any interruptions. And Fawn, thanks so much for being here today. I'm going to officially do your bio in just a second, but just want to welcome you. Super grateful that you're joining us and imparting all of your wisdom. So thanks for being here.
Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it is a pleasure. Let's see, I got a couple people in the waiting room here. Sorry, I knew people would be. That's all good. So it takes me just a second because I'm multitasking today. So everyone, thank you for joining us. This podcast is sponsored by Women in Leadership Empowered. And we're very fortunate that we are able to have amazing women from around the globe join us in these conversations to share their wisdom, their knowledge, their experiences, and collectively so that we can all grow and get to know each other. And to me, that's a super important way of how we personally grow in life. And so today we are super fortunate to have Fawn Annan with us. Fawn is the CEO and president for IT World Canada. She also acts as the Chief Marketing Officer in a digitally first enterprise. She joined IT World in 1995 as the General Manager under executive programs and launching the publishing enterprise into C-level events and research projects. In 2008, she was promoted to the Chief Strategy Officer, helping IT World navigate the turmoil that was descending upon the print industry. That it had to be like just a huge endeavor, Fawn. So I can't wait for us to get into some of this. A few years later, in 2010, she assumed the role of president, and in 2014, invested as a shareholder in IT World Canada. And in 2018, she assumed the legal position of chairman of the board. Fawn is also the chairperson of Canadian Channel Chiefs Council. She sits on the board of governors for Mackenzie Institute and formerly the vice chair on the National Board of Canadian Women in Communications and Technology, as well as part of the advisory council of the Canadian Advanced Technology Association and the PAC committee member for Ryerson University. She's operated her own business and held senior positions in marketing and strategy with a variety of different firms. In 2012, she received the Queen Elizabeth Diamond Jubilee Award for her contribution to the IT industry. In 2017, she was awarded the, I think I'm saying this right, Fawn, MISA, M-I-S-A?
Municipal Information Systems Association.
Thank you. And the Dennis Steen Award and the RBC Kata Sarah Kirk Award for Entrepreneurs and Innovation, recognizing her contributions to the industry. Somebody else is just trying to get in. She received her education in Canada, attending the University of York, and studied communications and business, but she also studied at Boston's famous Babson College, which houses the IDG Publishing Institute, and received her MBA in Media Leadership and Sustainability from Cumbria University in Northern England. So she has many, many awards. She has done many things, and I am so grateful for Fawn being here today to just really share, a bit about her journey. If this is your first time joining one of our podcasts, I welcome everyone here today. And, this is a conversational style conversation. And then when we get about 15 minutes before we wrap up, I will open up the Q&A for everybody to ask questions, and I'll ask you to turn your videos on at that time. But for now, let's jump in and learn more about Fawn Annan. So Fawn, is everything okay there? You can hear us well?
Yeah, I can. And I have no problem if anybody just wants to use the chat. If, I'm saying something and they have a question that they'd like me to address while I'm talking to you.
Okay, awesome. Very good. Well, let's jump in. So let's talk about, how did you even decide digital media and marketing was the business that you wanted to be in? And maybe give us a little background on your company.
Okay, so IT World Canada was initially called Laurentian Technomedia, and it was started in 1982. And in 1982, the majority shareholder at the time did a global deal with the largest publishing company in the world, IDG. And so what happened was they took over their global titles, but created Canadian content for those titles for a Canadian audience. So it was a traditional publishing business. and they recruited me. I had several of my other own businesses at the time. I'd worked for large companies like Panacom, HP. I was under contract for 2 years under Microsoft. So I've done other things, but I had started in my business an executive camp for CIOs, and that's why ITWIL Canada came after me. They needed somebody to create that division. So when I started there, they weren't digital media and digital marketing, they were print publishers. Very different. And I started in 1995, just to give you some time frame.
Yes, exactly.
So,
things have changed since then.
So as you know, I took on an executive role there and a very senior output to help IT world grow its revenue streams. At the same time, the world was changing, the internet was changing. And by 2008, the disruption had really begun very aggressively, but it depended what part of the world you were in. So we had been experimenting for at least a couple of years on our own website. And it, when I think back about what we had done initially, it was an elevator. You come to our website and you get on an elevator, and depending what topic you wanted would depend on what floor you got off on.
Oh, so, wow.
When you look back, oh my God, what a juvenile concept. But at the time it was, wow, this is amazing. Aren't we brilliant? But we had no idea what digital marketing meant. Outside of emails, because as a publisher, you're always spending most of your money on your subscriber base. But as we became more sophisticated and as our clients became more sophisticated, we learned to grow with them. But what I found very quickly, and the reason I did that MBA in media leadership, was that nobody really had business models for publishers that were being disrupted. And we were one of the first, like the music industry, to be fully disrupted.
Oh,
I mean,
wow.
you're at 100% of your revenue is print, and then all of a sudden, within 10 months, you're lucky if you're scraping 20%, yet you have 100 people that are depending upon their salaries every week. It was, not a great place to be.
Yeah.
So, I did that MBA in order to find, is there any business models? And what I found was, there are multiple business models in theory, which
yes, theory is always good.
theory, which is very much like academia, but in practice, the ones who had a lot of money, like the really big publishers, they weren't in Canada. IDG was experimenting, and they had, hundreds of millions of dollars to do that, and companies like Forbes. But, we were a much smaller enterprise in Canada. So we had to be really, really smart. So one of the things we did adopt very early was Agile Development, because, our philosophy was fail fast.
Yeah.
Do small, windfalls and fail fast if you're going to fail, and then start again until you get to a place where it seems to be working. But what we also found was there is no one solution, or you implement this and then it stops, because it is a digital transformation, remains a digital transformation, because the world's, just changing so fast. We are always evolving. And
I was gonna ask you about that, because even when you think about what's happened with COVID, like your business continues to evolve, and you really do practice a lot of agility, ensuring that you're meeting the needs of what's happening today, which is hard for businesses. So how do you continue to do that?
Well, first of all, you get a really good bank.
Yes, great point.
But I think that the most important thing is that you have healthy receivables, so that you can invest, back into those experimentations, and that is key, because as we move along, and as the technology changes, and as the competency levels change, your staff is. Your staff looks a lot different at the end of a 12-month period than it did, at the beginning of that 12-month period. And sometimes it's not because we're asking them, to perhaps, find a more suitable job, they found a more suitable job. I mean,
Mhm.
the one thing that's really important about this whole discussion about women and leadership is knowing who you are and what you do best. And, as we heard just a few minutes before we started, you got to be passionate about it.
Yeah.
So, not everybody's going to be passionate about having to learn a whole new skill set.
Yes, absolutely. Most people aren't, because they're terrified of change because it's the unknown, right? Or it's that fear overwhelms. And so it sounds like you have created an environment that embraces that change, and helping people understand it's okay to fail, like, because you're learning when you fail, but to your point, do it really fast, right?
That's right. And you have to cut your losses. I mean, that's the one thing, is that you should never fall in love with one idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
So
just
true.
like, just like employees should never fall so madly in love with their job that they can't move on when it's the right time to move on for their own development.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not just the company's development. So I think that, that's all part and parcel, but today we're in a very different environment where it's an employee's dream. It's like when I came out of university, it didn't matter what your skill set was. There was 1,000 jobs. Just knock on a door and say you're willing to show up at 9 a.m. and you got the job.
Yeah.
It's really that competitive. And also what's happening, it's not just in the United States, but up in Canada, is the massive amount of consolidation between the large companies is also making it very hard. So, we're losing on one side a tremendous amount of knowledge workers I'm in the publishing tech side. But at the same time, we're embracing a brand new generation of young people who are just coming out of school or have a couple of years underneath their belt. So, where do you get a workforce with 5 generations in it?
Yeah. No kidding. No kidding.
That's what we're looking at, right?
Absolutely.
So if you're looking at that, then what's the most important thing, or one of the most important things for a leader in being able to handle the massive change, the constant churn, is resilience.
Mhm.
You absolutely have to be resilient. And I think so does your employees. And
Yeah.
that's, you have to teach them.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you really hit on a number of things there that are important lessons with respect to the agility and being able to even be ahead of the time, right? Like starting to see what the trends are that are happening and how do you very quickly evolve. And yes, you're right, you got to have the financial backing to be able to evolve, but it's also a mental game. It's very much, you've got to be willing to see the possibilities in what's happening, and the resiliency is huge. And this past 18 months has been a big test for all of us, right? And how do we maintain that resiliency? So you really keyed in on a lot of important pieces there. One of the things I've watched as I've known you for the last many years is your passion and your energy when it comes to advocating for others, and especially women. Like, you've been a real force in the tech world in promoting women and helping, women find the right mentors. So maybe let's talk a little bit about, where does that drive and passion come from?
I think it comes from my upbringing.
Okay.
My mother was, and my grandparents on both sides, my mother and father's side, were very strong women. And they, for unfortunate reasons, were left at a time where they had to raise multiple kids,
Mhm.
and didn't have the support of their husband behind them. So they had to become more entrepreneurial, because whatever they made is what the kids would be eating. I mean, I even in my case, my father, he was a traveling salesman, basically. Like, but when he traveled to Australia, which was the end of the world, and then we wouldn't hear from him for 3 years. So that
Oh boy.
mother in a bad situation, but she was very ballsy, and she believed and was very passionate about keeping that marriage ahead. So she got a loan from the bank, and when my brother was 2 and I was going on 8, we were on a plane to Australia, which took 5 days in those years to get there.
Mhm.
And he didn't even know we were coming. So, that's a very ballsy woman, and she was supported by her 5 sisters. So because, they were so close and they supported each other, I was brought up in that environment. And that just continued, through my life, because I found, yes, I've had close male friends, and I still do. I have a few, but there's nothing like your own female tribe, because you talk differently and you talk about different things, and you get a different level of support and a different level of emotional safety, where you can actually talk to them and not be concerned that they're going to think you're too emotional. When really all you're expressing is either your frustration, or you're trying to get some type of person to say, yes, I feel the same way, or I've experienced that, or I know somebody, who's gone through that. And especially when it comes to real big business problems. When it comes to real big business problems, it's great to talk to another female who has or is going through the same type of problem, because they'll have a different way of looking at it and communicating to you, so that you can walk away. Not to say that their advice is going to be better than your male counterpart. It's just going to be different, and it's going to give you a different perspective. So I think it's incredibly important if you want to stay healthy.
Yeah. Oh, wow. So let's just dig into that for a minute, because what you just described there, I mean, that's a lot about what Women in Leadership Empowered is about, right? It's that community and connecting with amazing women. And it's not just in career, right? It's in our lives. And I think sometimes too, it's that ability to listen in a different way that can be not just comforting, but that you use the word safe. And I think that's very important, because you can show up vulnerably and really express who you are and how you're feeling without any kind of big consequence.
Yeah, I think that all comes down to, especially talking about leadership, is not only knowing who you are, but who you're not. And in many cases, who you're not is much more important, because that will lead you to wiser decisions.
100%. So why have you picked, because I do know that, you've had a lot of women that you've impacted in your life. And so part of that is also helping them find the right male allies, right? And so why has that been important to you, to help people find that balance, I guess is the best way for me to say it?
Okay, so, I've been in this game a long time, and we've been watching the stats for many years. And quite honestly, we haven't moved it very far.
Yes.
And it's very frustrating, especially given all of the time, the millions of women who are involved, the money that's being poured in, the research that's being done, the education that is out there in major universities like Stanford and Harvard. And still, it doesn't make a difference. The fact that, there's more Johns who are CEOs than women CEOs in the United States is a crime. It's shameful.
Yes.
It's not to say we haven't moved the ball forward, but it's so slight, it's awful. And so I always felt that, I know how hard it was for me. And just to give you, like, I'm in my 60s now. So, I came from a time when we were just beginning, to we'd already burnt the bra, but we were just beginning to show up and in the corporate hallway and say, I don't like the way you talk to me.
Yes. And don't do it again.
Right, like that. That was a very, very new thing. And I remember the first time I did it, I was I think it was 23 years old, and I was at a meeting with Imperial Oil. It was a room full of 21 men with suits on, and me. And I thought that where the conversation was going, they were missing the point of what they were trying. So I got up and started talking. And I remember the guy at the end of the chair, who was basically the chairperson, sit down now.
Wow.
I never would have done that if I had been a man, no matter how young I'd be. He'd make a joke about it. But because I was a young woman, and, the atmosphere was more one of bullying.
Yeah.
And I've seen that all the way through. And when I see people being bullied, that makes me want to do more.
Yeah.
And I have seen women, young women especially, being bullied all the way through, even in IT world, in the early days. You get a very aggressive, highly paid sales guy, and they didn't like that they weren't getting what they wanted when they wanted it. And they would just take a young woman who's working her guts out to make you successful and drag her through the mud publicly. And I can't handle that. So, those are the types of things that really upset me, but they also drive the passion to help others.
So I love that. And two great examples, and maybe you can expand on, like, if you're in that position, right, where you see another male or female, but predominantly this happens to the females. When you see that happening, how do you approach that? What do you do?
It depends what position you're in.
Okay.
So when I was reporting into the president of, ITWC, well, I went straight to him.
Mhm.
And I basically said, this is what's happened, and I want to know what you plan to do about it.
Okay.
And I wanted to make sure that what he was saying that he did do, and that it allowed the situation to become, a better situation versus having to go and just fire the person.
Right.
So, like, I'm not out to go and fire you because you were a jerk, last week, so and so. But if there isn't a change in behavior, which is really, in many cases, it starts at the top.
Yeah.
And then
absolutely.
and then it comes down. But today, what's really interesting is that there's a lot that actually is now starting from the bottom and going up.
Mhm.
So, life has changed, and I think that corporations have changed. I don't think, as we attract a much younger workforce, they're not interested in hierarchical structures. They're
Not at all.
in listening to the leader from above. It means nothing to them.
Yeah.
Especially when they think they have better ideas,
Yes. Yes.
more modern ideas. And in many cases they do.
Yeah.
So it's just a different ballgame. But that's one thing. As president, I've actually fired people. I have fired them because I have seen a long enough trend that I know I'm not going to be able to change your behavior.
Well, and that's good to know, because sometimes if you can't change the people, then you got to change the people, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And if there's patterns that are happening, then that, we've got to cut our losses here, because if it can start small and then it creates a toxic environment for the whole organization.
Yeah. And
so
a lot of times you're the last one to know about it.
Yes, most times, right? I mean, that's why it's so important keeping your ear to the ground and observing and hearing what's happening.
Yeah.
So I want to go back to that example you shared when that chairman said to you, sit down. So, that's highly intimidating, and this still happens today, right? Like, you can be in those meetings and you're presenting something, and then someone else just starts talking over you and actually shares the exact same thing that you've just shared. So what are some ways that you've been able to, first of all, navigate that, but, as a 23-year-old, having that confidence to continue, right? Because that's pretty humiliating. So how did you maintain that?
Who said I continued in that meeting? I didn't. I sat down, I sat down, I shut up. And I think within 2 months, I got myself a new job because I wasn't happy. But, you can only do certain things depending on where you are in your life. It's, another interesting, the opposite thing happened where I had my first business. It was an animation studio. And I had picked up a huge contract with a very large realtor contractor. And the idea was to animate this new development, which was near you, actually, Vicki.
Oh, okay.
And so in order to do this, I had to hire a helicopter, a pilot, the whole thing. It was very expensive. We were almost 2/3 through the contract, got a call from the agency. And they said, oh, Fawn, really hate to do this to you, but contract's been canceled. Therefore, we will not be paying you. Excuse me?
Wow.
So now, still young. I'm older than I was, but I'm still young. And I'm freaking out because I know how much money I just spent.
Yes.
And the chances are that the client didn't even know who we were. We were hired through the agency. So I made some calls, and somebody recommended a great male business consultant who I talked to, and he heard about the situation. He said, okay, this is what we need to do. He says, we're going to make an appointment. We're going to go and see, the president of the agency. He says, but Fawn, you're only 27 years old. You have to keep your mouth shut. I said, excuse me? You have to keep your mouth shut because you have to understand how they look at you. You're nothing. The client doesn't know you. They can step all over you. You don't have the type of money to fight them. Just keep your mouth shut. He says, things will work out. So I trusted him and I went there. And so he took us in. He apologized to me. This isn't personal. It's not that your work wasn't great, blah, 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 but it happens. But I do understand you have some expenses. So we're prepared to give you 10% of the contract. What do you think of that, Fawn? And I just looked at him and said, nothing. I said, nothing. So then he stopped, and about a minute later, he said, all right, well, maybe I can arrange 30%. Would that be better? I said nothing. And I said nothing all the way through that meeting until I got my 100% and I walked out of that room. So, it's strategy and it's planning. And that's basically my advice when you get into these types of situations, is that if you go into a meeting and because you've already experienced that people are talking over your head, what the meeting is about, you actually have to come with more information. You have to have planned what it is that's important that you're trying to set out, and you have to set it up that way. If you just walk in and you have great ideas like everybody else, and you're just, talking, off the top of your head, which many times we do. If you already know you're going to be ignored, why would it be any different? It's not going to be any different. But if you have a plan around a certain area that meeting is about, unless you're meeting just to meet, and then it's going to be a waste of time anyway. You might as well not say anything.
Okay.
That's the way I would handle it.
Okay. So that's definitely a way to go about it for sure. And someone, I think it was Nicole, posted that sometimes it's not just men who do that. Sometimes it could be a woman, right? An aggressive woman who is whatever, lashing at you, trying to belittle there's different reasons some of these things happen. And I think the point is for us to be aware of something you just said, like, what's the end goal? What is the end goal of what you're trying to achieve? And what's going to help you get to that place? I think the important thing, Fawn, and you said this a moment ago, even when you talked about you left that organization after he said, sit down, shut up, It's maintaining that confidence, because even though you didn't go forward with that company, you didn't allow that to impact who you were. And you were able to keep your confidence up so that you could go find another job, right? And I think sometimes what people forget is it's a mutual relationship, right? And if somebody's making you feel less than what you are or what you're capable of, then that's not a two-sided relationship. That's one way. And so you have to figure out what is important to you in the long run.
That's right. And so, when it comes to women who are aggressive, the good news from my perspective is, yes, we've all experienced it, but they're the minority, they're not the majority. Yeah. And I think that's important, because we tend to just bring forward like the horrible stories about women with other women, and that's what the men hear. So, yes, they have this image that we all have,
cat fights.
And it's really not true. But unfortunately, if you do come across that for whatever reason, they're either trying to take you out.
Yeah.
It's not just maybe that they're jealous, but they really have an agenda, their own agenda, and that's to move you out.
Yeah.
You have to recognize those signs, and you have to have your own strategy, and you have to have your own truth. And the most important thing is, if you spend time to understand who you are and who you're not, that is going to help you form a much better strategy to work on that particular problem, because it is a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That is such a key point. And knowing who you are and what you're capable of, like not ever losing sight of that. Even what you said earlier about fail fast, right? If you're not stepping up in a situation or you're not clicking, know that and move along, right? Find the place where you do fit, find the place that is serving you as much as you're serving them. So Fawn, how do you create that support system? Like you've navigated a lot and you've done some, I mean, you've had multiple awards, you've navigated some incredible business adventures. How do you put that support system around you or mentors that help you, stay focused and calm and navigate?
Are you talking about mentors for me or mentors?
Yeah, like how you've done that, and then you can share tips on how someone else could do that.
Well, I've had a couple of mentors, but I must admit that I've never had a female mentor.
Okay.
I've only had female colleagues who've been incredibly supportive, and I've been supportive back. The couple of mentors I had were in very specific situations. They were males who had very, very high positions that could open up doors for me.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, most of the women didn't have that ability, because if you're looking at, going up the ranks in a corporation, you need those doors open.
Yeah.
And the bigger the corporation, the more doors you need open,
Yes.
or at least the right ones, right? And you don't have a lot of time because it's a very competitive position. But with women who I feel need mentors, I have joined groups like WCT where they have programs where, we decide with the other person, with the mentee, that we would like to spend time and help one another because we have a background that makes sense. Actually, when I joined WCT, like, I guess it was almost, 10 years ago, the first person I mentored was a CIO from a legal firm who was having confidence problems with the executive team, and they weren't listening to her. She was a CIO,
Yeah.
but she wasn't being listened to. She wasn't a lawyer, which is where she worked, so she didn't have the same status.
Right.
And the legal team, the legal executives, didn't put emphasis on what technology could do to enable their business. And she wasn't articulate enough or confident enough to explain that. So that's really what the mentoring was about, was, being able to craft that story and then have enough confidence to deliver it and set some small goals that you could then grow larger goals with. So, that those would be the types of things I would do. Here within my own company, I always ask the ladies, would they like to join this group? Would they like to join that group? Would they like to take some development in this area? Sometimes we hire private coaches because you can see this huge potential, but they need help. They need help to get to the next level, and they're thrilled.
Absolutely. Yes. Well, when you're recognizing them and saying, hey, I see huge potential, and then you're helping them with the resources and resources to help them build on whatever that is that's needed or required to take things to the next level, which is awesome.
And then you have things like, the Ryerson pack that I sit on. So that's an IT pack, and we work with students, young men and women. And because it's Ryerson, the majority of them are immigrants. And they need a lot of help, because they, first of all, have to navigate Canada. They have to navigate the world around them.
Yes.
Well, most of them have English.
Okay, good.
They come over, they already have good English. And they're, third, fourth year students, or they're about to enter into their their master's degree. But their culture, and the way they were raised, very different. They need to understand the nuances that's going to make them successful. And they also need to understand that because of who they are, that actually gives them an edge. It gives them an edge by being who they are, not trying to be somebody that they're not.
Yes, and that's a big one, because we do try to model others, and eventually the people you're working with or talking to, they eventually figure out who you really are. So you have to, it's that authenticity coming out, right? And really being and showing up as to who you are, because you have different gifts and talents to model.
Exactly.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. And so what about like just having a support system? That as we'll call it the sisterhood, the tribe. You mentioned the tribe when we first started talking. What are some ways that you build that, and not just career wise, but those connections that you rely on? Like, what are some things that you do that?
Well, first of all, the big one is networking. Mm-hmm. You have to get out there and you have to network. And I've known women who are absolutely brilliant and they can't stand going out and meeting other people. Yes. They can't stand it, but they force themselves. Yeah. But they don't do it often. But every time they've done it, they've met just one amazing person that's changed a lot about their course. Yeah. And so I can't talk enough about the ability to network. And we all know how to do that, and I think that the big thing, and it's not about being a leader, because you can be a leader as a person who's just walked into an organization and has the lowest role there. It's really about putting yourself out and showing up, like just show up. That's half the battle, show up. And I can tell you, the older you get, the harder it gets to show up. but that's number one. Show up and bring your best game, to the meeting, because it's the first impression that will stay forever.
Yes. So true. That is like that's your billboard, your branding, right? That's that first impression. And just on a side note, if anybody does struggle with connections and networking, on October 20th, I'm actually hosting a masterclass with the Women in Technology Summit to talk about how you build those connections and how you network, especially in today's environment with, we're hybrid models, we're virtual models, and then how to still be safely meeting people in person. So anyway, sorry, Fawn, I just wanted to bring that up.
That's great. I think that's great. And it's harder to network virtually, obviously.
It is.
The good thing is that you get to go to a broader amount of people, in different regions, but it's not the same as being in a room, and looking in your eye and connecting, person to person. But it doesn't mean it's not as valuable, and that you can't build on that relationship, because over time, eventually you are going to meet. 100%.
100%. Yes. And for some people, it's even easier to do it virtually at first, because they struggle in the big room. To your point earlier, when that's very overwhelming. So, but I love the advice that you have there. So what sage advice would you be able to share with our audience? Like one or two things that they could take away and really implement to help them navigate their careers and lessons that you've learned?
Well, I think, you got to do things on your own term. That doesn't mean it should be unreasonable.
Yes.
You have to be reasonable. But if you can't do things on your own terms, and when I say that, things that you're comfortable doing, because A, that you're competent in doing it, B, it really plays with your own value system. It's something that that you like, or even hopefully you're very passionate about. That's what you need, as you move forward. You have to do things on your own terms. And in order to do that, as I said earlier, you have to know who you are and who you are not. Yeah. So that would be the first thing. I think the other thing, and this is where women have a lot of problems, and this is where the confidence issue is a problem, is that it's tough to make an impact without taking a risk.
Yeah.
And I think that's where many younger women and some older women fail. Like, you take the risk with the understanding that you have to manage the risk.
Yes.
So again, it's back to the planning, right? Take a risk, but manage it. Yeah. Just don't take it, jump at it, and then fall off the building. Because
exactly.
Some people do that. I think it's important that we understand that we struggle with our own voice. It's not the same voice as a man, but it doesn't mean as it's less powerful. It
Yeah.
just means it's different. And that's okay. And that's part of accepting who we are and how the
Yeah.
world sees us. It's how the world also sees us. That's a really big thing. And just remember that you don't have to be a man to be a great leader. You just have to know who
100%.
you are.
That's beautiful. Yes, absolutely. And more of us need to embrace that, right? Embrace who you are and the strengths that you have, because only you have that. That's what makes you different, unique.
That's right.
Awesome. Thank you for that. So I want to open up the questions to the audience, and you've given amazing feedback here, and we've had lots of comments in the chats. Everybody's, a couple of people had to go to meetings, but thanking you for all the great wise wisdom that you're sharing. So I want to open it up. If anybody has questions, please, turn your video on, turn your mic off, or turn your mic on, I should say, so that you can ask Fawn any burning questions that maybe have come to mind as we've talked about her journey today.
Or tell me your journey.
Yes, exactly. That works too.
Hi, it's Melissa. I have a question.
Sure, Melissa, go for it.
I think this is the first time I've actually heard someone mention make sure you know who you're not. And I find that really interesting. And I'd love an example of how you discovered something about yourself that you are not. And just a bit of background. So I'm in a job search right now, and I'm exploring all kinds of opportunities and some things that I would never have considered before because I didn't think I was that person. But at the same time, I'm really wanting to stretch and grow and take a chance. It's sort of like part of discovering who you're not, also taking a risk and finding out, oh, that wasn't me. And can you do that when you're older than 50?
Oh, absolutely. You can do it any time of your life, anytime. We never stop learning. We're all, most of us are open to learn something new. It's just a matter of how comfortable you are. And so as an example, if you're looking for a job, and I don't know what your background is specifically, but let's say you are looking for a marketing job and you have a lot of years in marketing, but you don't have a lot of years in research. But this job happens to be heavily skewed to research, but you need the job. So you're going to try it anyway because you're confident and you figure you can pick it up. But it's really not your cup of tea. You don't like it. You're not good with numbers. You're not best at analytics, but you're great at being able to take the information once it's done and make a great story. That's knowing who you are and who you're not, and which area of the job you should apply for or not apply for. So that's part of it. But I also think that if it's also about an environment. So if you're interviewing for an environment that is very aggressive, and that's the expectation, but you are really all about balance and family and, having, no more than 50 hours a week that you're working, which is still a huge amount, then you got to know that that's not suitable for you. You need a different type of job. Like, unfortunately for me, about a week and a half ago, my VP of marketing and communications resigned. And why did he resign? Because he had reached a point where he realized, I can't do these amount of hours anymore. I'm getting older, it's too stressful. And he opted for a government job, 35 hours, pension, out of there by 4. I can't fault him for that.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that's what he was when I first met him, which was many, many years ago. He wasn't. But over the years, he changed. And this is who he is now. So we also change, and what we're not today. Saying, does it count if you're over 50? You're still young.
Yes, exactly.
Lots of years.
I'm just having an existential crisis. I don't know who I'm not. But I guess I do.
I think you do. Yeah. And I think that when it strikes you in the face, you really know. Yeah, it hits us in our gut.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's trusting that gut, right?
Yeah.
Like trusting what's showing up and not ignoring it because we feel we have to do something. So really paying attention to that. Great response. Thanks, Melissa, for that question. Anybody else have a question? Come on, ladies. I know you're not shy.
Christine, you just moved to, you've changed your life. You must have something to say. Doesn't have to be a question.
Thank you. Yeah,
Of course, she froze.
I did. Yes.
uh,
There
but
you are.
thank you. Sorry, I have a bit of unstable internet.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. So I just really relate a lot to you in some ways, and in other ways, not at all. And I found your story really fascinating because I started my professional career in print and publishing media, working for a small publisher who published magazines like TV Guide magazine, Canadian Living, Home and Garden, those kinds of things. And I loved working there. It was like, I just loved it in the early 90s. And I've had instances of bullying in the office, especially multi-generational, where I was a young woman and I had an older man physically abusing me in the office in a corporate setting, which was really surprising. He came from an area working with solely men, and then later on in his career, he was having to work with women, and it wasn't such an easy adjustment for him. He thought he was being funny and joking and, offering camaraderie, but that just doesn't work with women in a corporate environment. So he had to learn that pretty quickly, and he retired not long after that, thankfully, but he apologized, but I couldn't speak to him directly about that. I had to go to human resources at the time. I felt that was my only option. And it worked out in the end, but I certainly do remember those days. My question to you, the other thing that I don't relate so well with you on is I come from a long line of women that have low self-esteem. And it's something that we continue to battle with as time goes on. Even my mom and all of her sisters were all battling still in our late stages. I call it late stages. I'm in my 50s. My mom just turned 70. And her sisters, she has younger and older sisters. So we're still battling that. And so from that perspective, my journey is much different than yours. So thank you for just sharing all of that, because I'm in the process of having changed my career path lately, really looking to find my leadership. So this was a great conversation for me. My question to you is more on the print and media side. At the beginning of the conversation, you mentioned that the trend in print and publishing is changing still. And I'm curious, what do you see in the publishing world and how it's changing with technology?
Okay, if you're looking at newspapers, you only have to look at their P&L to know that they're not making any money from printing newspapers. So how are they still in business, and what is driving them as mega corporations? And what's driving them is data. So data is the new gold. It's not print, it's not news, but news is what engages the public. So you put it out there as your business card. And often I've gone out and I've said, our news sites, that's my business card. That's my calling card. So you know that I'm covering, that I'm connected, that we're also covering personalities, we're covering trends, we're covering research, we're doing all that stuff. But I don't make any money from that. I spend a lot of money having journalists write those stories. And Andrea, who does some work for me, she I'm sure she's smiling when I'm saying that. Where we make our money is we make our money from the data that we have from our opt-in subscriber base. I know more about my reader on these topics than anybody else does, because that's my niche. That's what I specialize in. And I'm a business to business publisher, not a business to consumer publisher, which is very different. So you had mentioned some of the titles that, you were working on, which is great. And was that McLean Hunter or Southern that you were working for?
Great question. We worked, Southern was the original printer in the early days, but no, it was Telemedia Publishing.
Okay,
which later was purchased by Quebecor World.
okay, yeah, yeah,
And then later purchased again by Transcontinental.
yeah. And then we purchased Transcons.
Okay.
So that's,
Small world.
yeah, so that's actually when I became president, was when we did that purchase of all their assets, of all their titles. And we brought in most of their staff.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, those were the bullies.
Yeah,
So,
they were.
yeah, when we brought the two organizations together, our biggest thing was, first of all, fighting off the bullies, trying to kill we and you, or us and them, which was terrible. That was the language of, non-collaboration. It was us against you. And that went on that took 3 years to break. That took a long, long time. The irony was that the writers that we brought over were the very best. It was everybody else that was. So, and that was the culture. I mean, that was what, Evans and Plessman had created. They were, big, sporty guys, and they were all about camaraderie, but male camaraderie. And it's very, as you said, or someone said, it's very different than female camaraderie. So that takes time. And I think that's the lesson here. If you have to give it a lot of time, because culture, as we all know, eats strategy. It's you can have the best strategy in the world, but if you have a crappy culture, just throw it out. It's never going to work. And so you have to be dedicated to the change, and technology doesn't make change. Technology enables change. And that's where I think a lot of people also get confused. Well, we just spent $1 million on our ERP and blah, 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 and we should have this, and we should have that, but nothing changes, except you're learning more processes, you're more confused than ever, you're frustrated, and your function eventually will change too, along with the people in your team. So just those are the things that I think everybody struggles with in any mid-sized to large enterprise.
Well, it's a great conversation around change, because I did see that while I was working with TV Guide magazine. Basically, in those 10 years that I worked for them in the 90s, I helped them introduce a digital platform. So the magazines were created initially in a cut and paste. We flew the boards out to the printers, then the printers went ahead every single week and printed 15 editions of the magazine. And over those 10 years, we transformed ourselves into a digital platform that annihilated 70% of our department.
Yeah.
So 7 out of 10 of us lost our jobs.
Wow.
As a result. So change in the print and publishing digital age has certainly been a requirement in that world, for sure.
But I think it's in every world. Like that's
Yes.
the thing. Like I can talk to any one of these ladies, and they're going through massive changes in their industry and in their workplace, because that's what the world is about right now. And that's not going away. It's the pace is getting faster. And you gotta take a deep breath, understand that's what's happening, and just go for it. Because if you don't go for it, somebody else will do it.
Yep. Absolutely.
And you only have so much time on this plane. There's only so much time. So you got to figure out what your own personal goals are, what's important to you. Somebody asked, what else are you excited for to achieve on your bucket list? You know what? I'm excited just to live day by day. That's what I'm excited about. I have a great family. I have a beautiful grandchild now, and I'm expecting another one. I want to be around for them to at least know me. And, I want to help influence their development to a certain degree. I don't need a big bucket list. I don't need to go to China, and I don't need to go to, I've done a lot of traveling. I've been very fortunate in my life. I just want to enjoy each day, and I want to surround myself with really positive people, because you are who you surround yourself with.
Absolutely.
Never forget that.
Wow. And that's where, when I asked that question earlier, Fawn, thank you for summing that up, because that's beautiful. You are who you surround yourself with. Fawn, I want to thank you, and I want to thank our audience for being here today and asking great questions. But Fawn, honestly, just a great conversation, super inspiring. And I'm so grateful to you for being here and imparting your wisdom with us today. And I want to just share with everyone that, our next podcast will be on September 29th. We will be speaking with Erica Biesenthal. Erica is a chief number cruncher, but she's all about how to help small to medium-sized businesses make more money and, really, pay yourself first. Because as women, we struggle to do that. We always spend money on everybody else. So she'll be talking to us about that. And then October 14th, we have Christina DeHosis, who will be with us talking about burnout and how to not get to that place. So thank you again for joining us today. Please follow us. This will be downloaded on Apple, Spotify, all the typical, podcast platforms, including YouTube. It's on our website, and share. Fawn had a great story to share with us and some really great learnings. So please feel free to share that episode once it's downloaded this weekend. So Fawn, thank you. I am so grateful, and wishing you a wonderful weekend and your time away.
Thank you.
And we'll be in touch very soon.
Okay, Vicki.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Take care.
Bye.